Hello everyone, welcome back to This Is Why We Stand. My name is Joe Archino, and today I'd like to talk about the Battle of Antietam, or as so many of us remember it as, Bloody Antietam. On September 17, 1862, Generals Robert E. Lee and George McClellan's forces faced off near Antietam Creek in Sharpsburg, Maryland. This was the first battle of the American Civil War to be fought on Northern soil and turned into the bloodiest single day in American military history, with more than 22,000 casualties. To put that into perspective, that's around 4 times the American casualties on D-Day in the Second World War. The Union had an overwhelming advantage at Antietam with 75,000 troops compared to the 38,000 Confederate troops. Many historians note that although Union General George McClellan repelled the Confederate advance into the North, he failed to make the most of his numerical superiority to crush Robert E. Lee's army once and for all. Antietam, after all, was the first time that the Confederacy went on the offensive during the war. Prior to that, all the major battles had been fought on Southern soil, and despite being outnumbered as they usually were throughout the war, the Confederacy handed the Union a stunning string of defeats while on the defensive. So kind of hoping to build off of the momentum that they had, General Robert E. Lee and Confederate President Jefferson Davis hoped that a successful invasion of the North would help France and Great Britain recognize the Confederacy as a nation. Since the invasion was obviously checked, that did not happen, and the Confederacy remained without the foreign recognition that they were desperate for. Probably the most important thing that resulted from the Union's victory at Antietam was that it allowed President Abraham Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln's preliminary Emancipation Proclamation declared that as of January 1st, 1863, slaves in rebel territories, although not in slave-holding Union border states, quote, shall be thenceforward, and forever free, end quote. And, of course, this executive order essentially freed enslaved peoples in areas of the South that were in rebellion. One last thing that I wanted to touch upon is that photographs from Antietam brought the horrors of war to Americans for the first time. 2 days after the battle, photographer Alexander Gardner arrived at Antietam and became the first person to snap images of an American battlefield strewn with the dead. The images showed many Americans the horrible reality of war. I think it's hard for us today to kind of envision what it must have been like, but you can only imagine back then if you had only been reading about the war and then for the first time you're seeing the dead, you're seeing mangled bodies on a battlefield, and you're truly understanding how horrible this war was. It must have been something just almost indescribable. But I think when we look back on the Battle of Antietam or the Battle of Sharpsburg as it was remembered in the South, it's so important that we keep these stories of these battles alive because, again, this was the single bloodiest day in American military history, North versus South. That is it for this episode of This Is Why We Stand. I want to thank everyone for listening, as always. For more on the Battle of Antietam, for more on the American Civil War, and of course for more stories of American military history, you can visit thisiswhywestand.net. And until the next time, everyone, Joe Archino here. I'll catch you in the next episode.